pious Ishgardian clergy guide the flock, and the devout knights protect the weak. Yet even the holiest of men succumb to the darkest of temptations. A valiant few take up arms to defend the downtrodden, and not even the holy priests and knights can escape their judgment. Pariahs in their own land, they are known by many as Dark Knights. It is no surprise that such a warrior could only be born in the frigid and forgotten alleys of Ishgard. Where there is no hope, it is a Dark Knight's purpose to guide the meek through the darkness. I think that it's safe to say that this is one of the most beloved jobs in all of Final Fantasy XIV. A major element of the Dark Knight's job quest involves judgment and protection, but not in the usual sense of good versus evil. Over the course of the story, we are exposed to a much deeper level of moral philosophy, which is what I wanted to discuss in this video today. The themes of the story boil down to competing ethical theories of deontology versus consequentialism. Deontology is most closely associated with the German philosopher Immanuel Kant. In his work, he believed that what defines humanity is our capacity to reason out conflict. Because we all bear this capacity for reason, our existence therefore guarantees us a level of dignity that is held in equal measure to those around us. As a result, we carry a set of rights and obligations which create an ethical line in the sand to prevent us from acting in a way which would violate the dignity and autonomy of others. This gives rise to two forms of ethical duty in deontology. The first is the perfect duty, which is any rule that exists with a single method of fulfillment. For example, it is a perfect duty to uphold your promises. Making even a slight intentional deviation from the promise would represent failure to adhere to this duty. The second type of duty is the imperfect duty. This describes rules which allow for different methods of fulfillment, such as the notion of doing the right thing. How much effort we are willing to put into abiding an imperfect duty is up to us. The most important takeaway is that deontology determines what is right and wrong through the adherence to perfect and imperfect duties, rather than the consequences or outcome of the action. The opposing ethical theory, which asserts that the ends justify the means, is known as consequentialism. In consequentialist ethics, an action which brings about more benefit to the collective than harm is regarded as good. Likewise, an action which harms the collective for the benefit of the few is wrong. Between deontology and consequentialism, the latter is oftentimes more attractive as an ethical approach since it presents the most clear guidance. While not without its flaws, in many circumstances it is easier for us to identify right and wrong when we know or expect a certain outcome rather than trying to interpret the intent of others. Where we commonly encounter a moral gray area in life and fiction is when the outcome which would benefit the most people conflicts with a perfect deontological duty, a duty with no compromise. We encounter such a scenario in the Dark Knight questline through the character Riel. Before we begin discussing Riel, it is relevant to bring up the events which lead to her story. The story begins when you hear from an Ishgardian citizen that a man was recently slain in a trial by combat with a group of temple knights. While traveling to the broom, you find the knights disposing of the body. As you approach the body and touch the soul crystal that lies next to it, you black out. You awaken to the sight of the same man standing over you and appearing to be in good health. He introduces himself as Frey. Before you can converse further, you hear a woman screaming in the distance. As you go to investigate, he briefly informs you of the danger of using the power which you've just been bestowed, and discusses the duty of a Dark Knight. He leaves you with this parting line: "The threshold we refuse to cross is the line we draw for ourselves. We fear the consequences, and people suffer for our indecision." You find an elderly woman kneeling on the ground following an incident with an Ishgardian knight which culminated in him taking away her granddaughter. A young man nearby remarks that it is not uncommon for the knights to take away girls her age. He suggests that if she doesn't fight back, they might let her go following a treatment that is left unspoken. Frey heeds the call to justice, and together you set out to confront the knights. Before you leave, however, Frey explains that you must have a mind to punish the knights rather than protect the girl. Otherwise, if they were to shield themselves by threatening her life, it could impede your justice. After fighting your way through the knights and growing accustomed to the power of darkness along the way, you save the girl from captivity. She expresses her gratitude towards you before departing, and Frey decides that it is worthwhile to see you grow further. Frey joins you as you travel to Thanalin in search of worthwhile opponents to practice communing with the dark arts. In the process, you are confronted by Isambard, a man whose life you once saved from the primal Ifrit. He informs you that the Amalja have redoubled and kidnapped several residents of Camp Drybone. Frey is quick to express his discontent by claiming that it should have been up to the residents to protect themselves. Nevertheless, he reluctantly joins you as you set out to save them. After saving the residents, Frey points out that you are covered in blood, but tells you to pay no mind to it and return to Isambard anyways. By doing this, you are rejecting the sanctity of your actions and forcing Isambard to confront the uncomfortable reality of the request he has made of you. As Frey puts it, those who don't kill shouldn't ask it of others. Later on, Frey expresses his disappointment in you by stating that while you may be a hero, you have failed as a Dark Knight. Putting yourself into danger to do the right thing in the eyes of other people means that you are likely to fail in making sacrifices out of self-preservation. To continue on in your training, you travel to Lenosha and catch Frey reminiscing about a time he nearly died in battle alongside an accomplice who you will meet later. In the meantime, a troubled merchant asks you to save his wares that have been taken by Chirin. Frey urges you to let him resolve the matter himself, but the promise of a worthy fight provides enough motivation for Frey to allow you to intervene. Despite the effort expended to recover the merchant's wares, he complains that the now blood-soaked products are worthless to him. Opportunistically, he demands that you take responsibility and pay for half the price that they are worth, to which Frey responds with a threat of violence. He walks off in anger at the depravity of Eorzea's citizens. When you approach him later, he leaves you with another important piece of advice for becoming a Dark Knight. Only when you have renounced everything are you free to do anything. Before you can depart on your next journey with Frey, a group of knights under the command of Lord Dromont request your aid outside the gates of Ishgard. They ask that you help them slay giants which have been expanding their territory. While you oblige, Frey overhears and decides that this is the last straw. After helping the knights, you are called away to answer to allegations that you were talking to Frey's corpse in the broom, only to find on arrival that he has subdued the knights sent to capture you. What you come to realize is that Frey never existed as you thought he did. He was actually just a manifestation of what the darkness inside of you represents. All of Frey's words and actions until now have represented your inner thoughts. After defeating Frey's essence, you are cheered on by the friendly Knights of Whitebrim, to which Frey responds that they only do this to comfort themselves in thinking that you can be controlled. He mocks the moniker of Warrior of Light, and instead chooses to refer to you as the Weapon of Light. Following his defeat, he returns to within you and says that he will return, should you ever have need of him. While at first it seems like the matter has been settled for good, a few knights who witnessed the event draw you away in order to seek vengeance for Frey's actions against their comrades. After slaying 2 of the knights, the remaining knight begs for his life and is spared. At this point, we are introduced to Frey's aforementioned accomplice, Sidurg. He bids that you join him at the tavern in Ishgard to converse further. When you arrive to meet him, he states that he doubts your conviction as he presents the blade of the man you spared, saying that he took his life shortly after you left. To justify the necessity of his actions, he shares with you his story of suffering at the hands of Ishgard's knights due to the prevalent misconception that the Aura are related to dragons. He introduces you to a young girl named Riel, who he has been keeping safe in secret for reasons unknown to him. He simply discovered that the Holy See of Ishgard was trying to track her down, and he decided that he wouldn't let them slay a child. In Riel's despondent state, she is not fit to explain why the Holy See is after her. Instead, Sidurg suggests paying a visit to the Vanu to ask their seers if they can uncover the reason. After approaching the Vanu, however, it is made immediately clear that they would prefer to have nothing to do with her. At this point, you are ambushed by a group of temple knights who have been following you outside of the city, presumably to deal with Riel away from the eyes of civilians, which might bear witness to the act and judge them accordingly. Sidurg persists in the quest to uncover Riel's secret, and so the 3 of you travel to Gridania. After another ambush along the way, you arrive in Gridania and meet the Conjurer's Guild. The conjurer performing the ritual on Riel explains that he sensed the dragon blood within her. Sidurg wonders in surprise if Riel could have consumed the blood voluntarily, as others had done in pursuit of power. Given her lack of transformation into a dragon, however, he realizes that it must not be so. Riel shares the story of her imprisonment by the Holy See and contemplates whether her death would have been for the better of all. Sidurg, conflicted in his belief of whether or not to continue protecting this girl, takes her back to the tavern for a meal and walks outside to compose himself. He resolves to stay with her by accepting that the sin of her existence is not her fault. In order to learn more about Riel's affliction, you travel with Sidurg to visit the Dravanians. The Dravanians immediately recognize Riel's essence and clarify that her lack of transformation must be evidence that it was passed on from her parents. After you return to the Forgotten Night with this information, a noblewoman named Istra de Calignac confronts you about Riel and challenges Sidurg to a trial by combat. Should he refuse, she threatens to burn down the tavern and eliminate anybody who would house him and Riel for the sake of capturing her. We can assume, based on her fervent belief in the god Halene, that her conviction and victory is supported by her faith. With no choice, Sidurg submits himself to the same form of trial which felled Frey not too long ago. Before Istra can leave, Riel calls out to her as mother, but her response makes it clear that she has long since recognized Riel as her daughter in substitution for her faith. In fact, she was the one who imprisoned Riel in the first place. For decades, Riel's father had been conducting rituals with the dragon's blood and passed it on to her. Once Istrid learned of this, she had him executed and planned the same for Riel to absolve herself through adherence to the guiding principles of her faith. Driven to not meet the same fate as Frey, Sidurg heeds the Dravanian's advice and seeks knowledge of abyssal power through an unlikely ally, the Mughals of the Churning Mists. The Mughals send you on a number of tasks under the guise of training while they converse with Riel. However, Sidurg sees through this and confronts the Mughals who have actually been using this time to motivate Riel to speak the truth of her feelings. Riel confesses that she sees through Sidurg's intentions of using her safety as an excuse to act out his own vengeance against the Temple Knights for the death of his parents many years ago. Sidurg admits the truth of this claim, but expresses his genuine care for her well-being. It is made clear to Sidurg in this moment that a Dark Knight's power originates from all emotions one experiences, not simply their dark side. For the sake of duty and honor, he vows to protect Riel in the coming trial and let her walk her own path once it is finished. The missive you receive from Istrid invites you to commence the trial by combat in the Western Highlands, away from prying eyes. When Istrid sees her daughter once again, she admits that she can only see the features of her husband on Riel's face, and it brings her disgust. Sigurd demands that she recognize the sins of her father separately from Riel, but Istrid accepts no judgment from him, as it was she who brought Riel's cursed existence into the world. After fighting through the legion of Temple Knights, Istrid is brought down. It seems at first that Sigurd plans to execute her. However, he stops to remind her that despite all of her actions and wishes, she is still Riel's mother. For this reason, he offers to spare her life so long as they never cross paths again. Istrid denies his mercy and pledges to continue on her quest for absolution in the eyes of Halene by bringing an end to Riel. At this point, Riel acknowledges that her mother's conviction has replaced her love and tacitly allows her death. Upon hearing Riel's blessing to Halene, Istrid offers a final motherly glance towards her daughter. After returning to the Forgotten Night sometime later, Sigurd mentions that he has rediscovered a forgotten purpose for his anger and rage through the desire to protect others. He offers to extend this protection to Riel, and she accepts, on the condition that he share his thoughts and pain with her as comrades. While Sigurd contemplates leaving Ishgard, he and Riel agree that they would rather not abandon the people who remain to the powers that be. There are obviously quite a lot of events to unpack in this story. Going back to the ethical philosophies I discussed in the beginning, we see that many of the actions taken by the Dark Knights in this story stand by deontological principles. Conversely, most of the other people in the story, most notably the Holy See of Ishgard, represent consequentialism. Thinking back to the early interactions with Frey, he bids that you make decisions at the discretion of your own morality and steel yourself to the ire of those harmed by the results of your actions. Recall that deontology is the applied practice of honoring duty based on societally accepted standards above all else. At many points in the story, he points out the number of ways in which you fail to follow his teachings. First, you unquestioningly fight back the Amalja at Isambard's disposal by telling yourself that what you are doing is to save those who were captured. It might seem noble at first to fight on their behalf, but how can you assume unlimited information that the people you are helping are those who are innocent? As it has been made clear in the main scenario quest, the tenuous relationship between the people living in Thanalan and the Amalja is withstanding through a cycle of violence and reprisal. In the second instance of your failure to follow Frey's deontological ethics, you are easily exploited by an enterprising merchant seeking to use your strength to recover a set of goods which had been stolen from him. You would be forgiven in this case for assuming that the man was a victim of circumstance, and therefore deserving of help. However, I choose to believe that Frey has encountered enough men like this to tell who isn't to be trusted. His suspicions are confirmed when the merchant demands that you pay half the value of the goods since they have been covered in blood. It leaves you to wonder if this had been his plan from the start. The third and perhaps most impactful betrayal of Frey's teachings is when you agreed to help Ishgardian knights slaughter the giants that are attempting to expand their territory. After all, why should you assist the same group of people who followed orders to take out Frey under the pretense that their opposition poses an imminent threat? In fact, by the time you have finished off the giants, the knights are about to bring you in for questioning based on witness reports that you approached Frey's body after it was disposed. Luckily, you are saved by Frey's attack against the knights, and he forces you to confront the fact that you were spurred to action upon request and not duty. As such, you exist only to bring out the desired outcomes for those capable of manipulating you, much like a weapon. As you finally accept the message that Frey has been teaching you, you take your first steps on the path to becoming a Dark Knight. It is at this point in the story that the ethical conflict begins to emerge as you interact with Sidurg. Early on, it is made clear that Sidurg and Frey are very much alike. In your early encounters, he is similarly skeptical that you are capable of carrying out justice. When he tells you that he is protecting Riel and that Frey died for her, he makes clear that they had no idea why the Temple Knights had any interest in capturing her. This is because the will to protect innocent people, and by some extension a child, can be regarded as a perfect deontological duty. He is committed to the uncompromising act of saving Riel without a moral regard to the consequences. If instead he faced this interaction from a consequentialist standpoint, he would have to consider whether sheltering Riel would in fact bring greater risk to life than he would be saving. As we follow Sidurg on the journey to learn more about Riel, we see his belief in perfect duty unraveling. Once it has been fully revealed that Riel is the progeny of draconic blood rituals, he begins to appreciate the inherent danger this presents. After all, Sidurg's family was slaughtered from a misunderstanding which would have never existed if the heretics hadn't consumed dragon's blood and infiltrated Ishgard through the course of the 1,000-year war. This is where Riel's mother Istrid comes in. Unlike Sidurg until this point, she disregards deontological duties both in protecting the innocent as well as her motherhood. To her, the consequence of Riel's existence and the danger of her transformation justify any method which would prevent this harm from befalling the masses. Because of this, she takes it as her responsibility to absolve the sin which she brought into the world, rather than leaving it to somebody else. In her interactions with Riel, we can see subtle cues that there is an internal moral struggle with this decision. First, we see that she copes by referring to Riel as it, rather than she in many circumstances, only slipping up once before her execution. In the second case, we see that she clings to her interpretation of the will of the guardian deity Halene for reassurance to the point of fanaticism. Rather than arriving at the same conclusion as Istrid upon learning Riel's nature, Sidurg chooses to believe in the girl he has come to know, rather than what she may become. Consequences be damned. He embraces the Dark Knight philosophy he shared with Frey, which relies on one's own moral judgment. To wrap up, I think that the story does an excellent job in crafting the job fantasy of the Dark Knight by presenting conflicting ideologies often associated with justice. By confronting dilemmas like this, it invites us to question similar circumstances in the world around us. That brings me to the end of this video today. I hope you liked it, and I look forward to putting out more content like this in the future. If you could please leave a like and comment about what you liked and disliked about the video, it would go a long way. Let me know if there's another topic you would like me to discuss, and be sure to subscribe if you'd like to follow my content. Thank you very much and have a pleasant day.